This is kind of weird, but I feel like it's, you know, like my origin story. So I don't know what's wrong up here. Are you okay? And then I convinced myself that my mom was possessed. Hello, creeps. Andy here. And a few days ago, I asked if you guys had questions for me so we could do a little Q&A video, and you guys left some questions, so that's what we're doing today. Before we begin, I just wanted to say thank you for being here. I appreciate anybody who watches my video or subscribes or leaves comments or anything. I really appreciate that you're here with me. So I just wanted to say thank you for that. I also want to say that you guys took the time to leave the comments, so I'm going to answer every single one that is on there. So this might be a long video. I can't promise that I'm not going to ramble on, but hopefully, I don't know, you can get to know me a little bit better, and I have a few questions for you guys to answer too, because I did look through some of these questions and some of them are just, they're too good. So let's get started. I'm just going to start from the top, and I won't be putting up anybody's username or anything. Okay, who is your favorite horror villain, book or otherwise? This is difficult. I think that for horror fans, I don't know why, but it's easier to like or respect or appreciate, not respect, but you know what I'm saying, horror villains in movies than it is in books. I don't know why that is, but I mean, we're all obsessed with horror villains in movies, but I will say that I think one of my favorite horror characters in a book is Clive Barker's Cabal. He has this character called The Mask, and without giving too much away, it's a guy that carries a suitcase with a mask inside of it, and the suitcase whispers to him, put me on, let's go kill people. And it's just such a cool character. So he is definitely one of my favorite characters, and definitely the Cenobites. I mean, the lead Cenobite has always been just one of my absolute favorites, so I think he will continue to be. Yeah, this is hard. This is a hard one. If I think of any other ones, I'll bring them up later, but those are the two that are just, you know, off the top of my head. Not really related at all, but I am hooked on Darcy Coates because of you. This makes me so happy. You guys have no idea how happy I am when I get a comment that says, you recommend this book, I read it and I loved it. It makes me so happy that I'm able to appreciate something and pass it on and that someone else can appreciate it. So thank you very much. I'm very glad that you're enjoying Darcy Coates. I, in fact, just finished the third in her Black Winter series, and I just was obsessed with that book. It was so amazing. So then I went and bought the fourth one. But yeah, her books, they're addicting. There's crack in them. You cannot convince me otherwise. But I'm really glad that you enjoy her work because she's amazing. What got you into the horror genre in the first place? For me, it was a desperate desire to get over my scaredy cat ways, which sort of worked. Also, as a newbie to your channel, you're quickly becoming one of my favorites. Thank you. This is funny. Okay, so I think a few things. One, I grew up being raised on books. My mom loved to read, and she always loved spookier stuff, Stephen King, that kind of stuff. And so I always gravitated towards creepy books. My favorite, like the books, hold on, let me grab them. Oh no, I just stepped on my zombie guy, and he screams when you step on him. Okay, let me find these ones. I credit these books for really getting me into the spookier side of reading. These are the Bailey School Kids. I read these even before I read Goosebumps. These were my favorite books growing up. They're about kids who solve the town's problems by these people who keep invading. Like this one, vampires don't wear polka dots, ghosts don't eat potato chips, and the kids are the only ones that are aware that these creatures are infiltrating the town because the parents are stupid and just too busy doing their own thing. So these really got me in the mood for spooky stuff when I was pretty little. I mean, I read these when I was very young. And then my mom, like I said, she bought me my first Stephen King novel, so we'd sit by the pool and read Stephen King novels together in the summer. And then I also my dad had gotten married a lot. So there were probably he had I don't know, 10 kids or something, half, step, all sorts of kids in the house. And so I was raised with, at his house, a lot of lack of supervision and a lot of older influence. And so I watched horror movies at a very young age, and kind of like you, they scared the absolute crap out of me. I had nightmares all the time. My mom would get so mad. Yeah, so definitely just being introduced to stuff very young, probably younger than I should have been introduced, got me into horror. And then eventually, like you said, I got to the point where I would watch something and I didn't have nightmares and it wouldn't scare me, and it really gave me this sense of power, like a sense of being able to overcome fears, and that has just always stuck with me. That was a really long answer. I apologize. How do you deal with being desensitized to horror? I personally feel this way for most movies and books, so I wanted to hear your perspective. I don't think I really am desensitized to horror. I mean, I will still watch a movie and have nightmares. I have nightmares all the time, I'm not gonna lie. But most of them aren't like I wake up and I'm panicking. Most of them are just, it feels like I'm watching a horror movie play out. I think that maybe I don't react to it in the way that some of my friends who don't watch or love horror do, but I've always kind of pushed the boundaries of horror. When I was a young teen and into my early 20s, all I did was try to find like the most depraved, unique, bizarre movies I could find. And so yeah, I think maybe just by reaching outside of the traditional horror box, and I think the things that freak me out now or intrigue me about horror now are things that I've never seen before. I like watching a lot of older horror films that inspired new work or inspired authors or what have you, because it gives me just kind of a new perspective other than the same old PG-13 slasher that's out. Not that I don't watch those, but I think just kind of always expanding my literary and horror horizons has helped me to not become desensitized to kind of the same old stuff over and over. Ray Bradbury is one of your favorite authors. I wondered if you had any spooky recommendations from him or someone that gives you similar vibes. And then you go and you list a lot of books that you've read from him. Something Wicked This Way Comes, The October Country. Those are the more definitely horror ones. You said Martian Chronicles. The only thing I would say, The Illustrated Man, that's a book of short stories that you didn't mention in here. I think that's probably one of my favorites. And One for the Road is also another book of short stories as well. And as far as people that give me the same vibes as him, he's very science fiction, so Philip K. Dick is a good one to look into, and maybe even some Isaac Asimov kind of give me the same like Ray Bradbury feel. Yeah, maybe those two you might appreciate too. Hopefully that helps. But I mean, yeah, The October Country I still think is probably my favorite Bradbury book. Is there a book or story that you found extremely disturbing even though it wasn't gory or gross? Have you ever been scared by a book or a movie though it wasn't strictly in the horror genre? I think the movies that kind of get under my skin the most, even though a lot of them are still in the horror genre, are like weird movies, like Eraserhead. I was just thinking the other day, do you guys remember that movie Pi? It was from the 90s. That movie's been on my brain a lot lately. I'm like, I really need to go revisit Pi. El Topo, like just weird movies that I just can't quite figure out. I think those are ones that bother me. Yeah, I don't know. I've seen a lot of weird movies. But as far as books that were disturbing without being gory and gross, maybe like Sylvia Plath's The Bell Jar. That one's pretty disturbing. And I would say, even though this is a horror book, I would say The Terror is one that probably disturbed me more than almost any other horror book that I've read. And although it is horror, it's not the horror elements that disturb me. It's not the supernatural stuff. It's just the daily lives. I guess true stuff gets to me a lot more. Same with like The Girl Next Door. Again, that is still a horror book, but yeah, just like true events that actually happen, have happened, could happen, really I think gets me because I put myself in those people's shoes and I just can't comprehend how somebody lived the way that these people lived, especially with The Terror. I mean, just like the mutiny and the lack of food and scurvy. Oh my gosh, I thought about scurvy. I did so much research about scurvy after reading that book, so hopefully that helps, even though they're still more horror based. What is the scariest book you've ever read? Oh, I just finished Black Moth and Terror. I found some of my favorite books because of your recommendations. That's so nice. Thank you. The scariest book. I don't know. It's so hard for me to pick the most of this, you know, because it just kind of depends what I'm in the mood for. The Terror, like I said, definitely got under my skin. That was one that really bothered me. And if I can put myself in the position that those people are in, those are the books that terrify me the most. So even another example is like The Ruins. It's not a true story, it never happened, but I do feel like I can place myself with them. I can feel their hunger, their thirst, their desperation to leave the ruins, and they can't. And so, yeah, I don't know that I have necessarily the scariest book. I'll have to think about that one. Are there any books where once you finished, you felt immediately or closely thereafter inspired by them to write? Yeah, all the time. Every movie I watch, every book, every time I close a good book, like a 4, 4.5, 5-star book, I'm like, oh. But then also, I do think that reading really good books does make me question myself as a writer too. I do feel like I've read something that was amazing or life-changing, and then I close it and I think I could never write something like that. So I think my inspiration, I feel like, comes more from movies, like a good horror movie, than books, because the books, I just like, I'm not even really thinking about my own writing when I'm reading something that's that amazing. I think that, yeah, hopefully that makes sense. Okay, I don't know how to pronounce this man's name, but it says Richard Brautigan. And then these are the books from him. Trout Fishing in America in Watermelon Sugar was/is one of my favorite authors, and I seldom see people mention him on booktubes. Any thoughts regarding plans about his work? So I've been dipping my toe into more surrealist avant-garde literature recently and doing a little bit of research into those categories, and actually In Watermelon Sugar did come up on one of my lists. So because you recommended, I will absolutely give that one a try and read it and see how I feel about it. And I don't know if they are surrealist or avant-garde books, like him in particular, but they are on those lists. So I'm not saying for sure that they fit into those categories, you know. People get real weird if you say something's in a category and it's not, and you're just like, I found it on a list, buddy, relax. But yes, I absolutely will check that out. Thank you for the recommendation. Do you ever watch extreme horror cinema? And if so, what are your favorite directors and films? Also, do you find reading extreme horror content to be more challenging than consuming it via film? I find that my sordid imagination heightens the emotional impact when reading, for sure. So, like I was saying, my early 20s, my teens, that's kind of when I was exploring extreme horror in more cinematic format. And I've watched a lot of messed up, you know, like a Serbian film and all those disturbing movies. So yeah, I mean, I've seen my fair share of messed up stuff. I definitely have done so much research into that, but I gotta be honest, the more I read, the more I am drawn to reading over watching movies. And I think, just like you said, reading is so much more visceral for me, and it impacts me so much more, and I find myself not enjoying horror movies less, but that I don't feel like they have the same shock value that a lot of the stuff that I read does. And also with my channel, it's just a lot of work. I really didn't know how much work YouTube videos were to make before I started doing this, and the fact that I'm making 2 or 3 a week, all the prep time leading up to it, then the filming, then the editing, the posting, it's a lot of work. And so I really just haven't had much time to explore cinema in the recent years. So maybe I will get back into extreme horror cinema maybe someday. But yes, I do find that reading does disturb me more than watching books does. Watching books? Movies. You get what I'm saying. Oh, what are some of your favorite films and directors? Okay, I'm not good with names of directors. I'm just gonna type in extreme horror movies and then just see, like, I've seen all, you know, like Cannibal Holocaust, Audition, Ichi the Killer, I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, High Tension, a Serbian film. Yeah, I've seen a lot of these. So I don't know that I necessarily have a favorite. Oh, American Mary's on here. I do love that one. Dead Alive. I love that movie. Some of these I don't know that I would count as extreme horror. I do love Eraserhead. That is definitely one of my favorites. Maybe I'll go and do a separate video on extreme horror movies, and we can talk about them and do a little bit of a deep dive. That might be fun. I was wondering if you do any horror conventions, and if so, do you have any fun stories or experiences you'd like to share with us? Also, do you think of doing a Chuck Palahniuk book ranking? Okay, yes. Okay, I used to go to Monsterpalooza every year with my brother. My brother did recently move, so I haven't been to a horror convention with him. I didn't go last year. but I usually do go to at least Monster Palooza. And then as far as Chuck Palahniuk, by the way, people say that I pronounce it wrong, or they ask me if I'm pronouncing it right. I mean, I started reading him before you could just go online and look up their names, you know what I mean, and how to pronounce them. So that's just always how I've said it. As far as his book ranking, yes, I definitely want to do a Chuck Palahniuk book ranking. I've been kind of thinking about taking my favorite authors and ranking their books from them. But I'm gonna reread all of his books because it's been a really long time. Fight Club is the only one that I've read recently, or recent enough that I could even rank it appropriately. So it's gonna take me a while to get to every single book from him, or at least the books that I own, or however I decide to do it. But yes, eventually I will. The only experience that I can say from the horror conventions is I don't know his name. I met somebody, I'll put up a picture, but I met somebody from Dusk Till Dawn, the movie, and I got a signed poster from him, and he was so fun. He was the sweetest guy ever, and he was like quizzing me on things from the movie. He's like, well, what color is the vampire's blood? And like, you know, it was so cute. And so yeah, he was really fun to me. A blast, absolutely sweet guy. But I've also met Tom Savini, I've met Bill Moseley, I've met Doug Bradley, I've met the brothers, the Chiodo brothers, I think is their name, the people who wrote and directed Killer Clowns from Outer Space. I've met a ton of them, and they're all nice. Doug Bradley was kind of funny. Somebody was asking him, oh, can you write a quote from Hellraiser number whatever, and he's like, do I even have lines in that movie? Yeah, it was funny, but he was the absolute sweetest, the guy from Dusk Till Dawn. I'm horrible with names, so I apologize, but he was really nice. Have you ever DNF'd any books because they were too appalling, disturbing, or terrifying? No, I do not DNF books. The only books that I haven't finished are books that are short stories that I've only read some short stories from that book. But I don't DNF them. I don't stop watching movies if I don't like them. I just can't get halfway through something and not finish it. So I never DNF a book. If not, what book came close? Ooh, that's a good question. This does not include DNF because of not catching your interest. Oh, too disturbing. A book that was so disturbing that I almost couldn't get through it. Is it messed up? But there really isn't one that I can think of. I mean, I definitely, when I'm reading extreme horror books, I need to set them down and step away. You know, maybe Baby in a Blender. That one was 13 pages and I couldn't even get through it. There is so much wrong with that book. It just wasn't a book for me. It just wasn't a book for me. Yeah, that one was really hard to get through. I would say that was probably the only book that I'm just like, I truly don't know if I could finish this. That was a good question. Okay, we know that Kurt Vonnegut is one of your favorite authors. Mine too, nice. Which of his books first got you hooked? My personal favorite is The Sirens of Titan. So I first read Slaughterhouse-Five. That was my introduction to him. And that book completely changed my life. I mean, not to sound too dramatic, but it really truly did. It made me realize that you have to understand the rules of literature to be able to bend and manipulate them in a way that doesn't destroy the read but enhances it, and that book is the perfect example of that. I always talk about this and I relate it to Quentin Tarantino, and I don't know if that is an appropriate comparison, but you know how Reservoir Dogs is a book about a heist but you never see the heist? And that's the same as Slaughterhouse-Five. It's an anti-war book, but you don't really see the war. And it's such an impactful, powerful anti-war book, but it talks about aliens. It's so off the wall, and Kurt Vonnegut has absolutely changed the way that I read literature, consume literature, write literature. I think he's an absolute genius. And then I just read Mother Night this year, and that book absolutely blew me away. So good. Are you still writing at the moment? What is your writing routine? And what are your favorite recent reads? Have you read My Heart is a Chainsaw? I have not. I've been a little nervous to pick it up because it seems that people either love or hate his writing style. So I haven't read that one yet. As far as my writing, I haven't had a writing routine. I'm not gonna lie, since we moved into this new place, I have been so focused on this channel, like giving everything I can to this channel, and it may not seem like it, but it just takes a lot to prepare for these videos. So I'm trying to find a way to, you know, to shift that a little bit, because I need to get back into writing. I need to spend at least a few hours a day writing. Yeah, I'm trying to find ways, but I'm not really at the point yet where I can cut back on my videos. So I'm trying to stick it out until January, and then I'm hoping in January I can kind of I don't know if even, I mean, tone back the videos, but maybe just make different types of videos. Like the reading vlogs, those allow me to do things outside of YouTube because I don't have to prepare for them. Most of the work that goes into my videos is the preparation work. I have to read a lot of video or a lot of books for one video, and so it does take a really long time. So I do write. I haven't been focusing on my longer format writing, and I really need to get back to it. What is your favorite writing perspective to read? A story told in first person from a central perspective, character's perspective, versus a story with a narrator that captures multiple characters or points of view. It depends, right? It depends on the story, and I think that there's definitely a place for everything. And I like variety. I mean, that's the biggest thing I think you can take away from my channel is I love variety. I will read an extreme horror book and then a cozy mystery right after. I really like the variety of text. And so I don't think I have necessarily a favorite where I would only want to read that perspective, but I do like omnipotent narrators, and I like when the reader gets to maybe get let in on things that even the characters don't always know about. That can be really interesting. But also I like, obviously, first person perspectives as well. We get to really know the characters in that sense too. So it's hard to say. Yeah. What are the most overrated, underrated, or fairly rated Stephen King novels in your opinion? Oh, P.S. Love your videos. Thank you. Okay. All right, let's do this. Overrated. The Outsider, Carrie. The Outsider, some of his supernatural stuff just isn't for me. And I don't particularly love when a story seems like it's going to be based in reality and then all of a sudden it's supernatural. It just kind of throws me off. Same with the last in the Mr. Mercedes books, the third one. And then Carrie, I can appreciate it. It's Stephen King's first work and, you know, really awesome first novel for anybody. But with all of the news articles and stuff in there, it kind of took me out of the story a little bit. So yeah, I would say those are probably the more overrated books. Appropriately rated, I would say The Shining, Pet Sematary, Misery. Those are just fantastic novels. And then underrated, I would say his novellas and short stories are underrated. A lot of people either love or hate Stephen King because of his super in-depth, long, 1,000-page novels, and those are great. There's nothing wrong with them. But I do think that his short stories and novellas get a little overlooked. If It Bleeds has some amazing novellas in it, and same with Night Shift. This guy is an older one, and I haven't read every single story in here yet, which is why it hasn't been in one of my videos, but I've just been kind of jumping back and forth and reading different stories. And I gotta say, Children of the Corn is one of the best short stories, one of the best works from him that is my favorite, that I just absolutely love. So yeah, I would say his short stories are the most underrated. Okay, oh, that was stressful. What are your favorite and most hated horror endings? Book, show, movie, whatever. Oh, this is so hard too because I am the type of person that needs so much time to really think about something. So this is just off the top of my head. I would say one of my favorite horror movie endings is The End of The Mist. That movie, at the end, you're just like, holy shit. What are your favorite and most hated horror endings? Oh, Hannibal. The book Hannibal. The ending of Hannibal was so confusing for me. And I think it's because I grew up with the movies, and so I felt like I knew Clarice Starling, and then that book, I just felt like she did everything against her character, and I was so absolutely confused by the ending of that book that I did not enjoy it. I'm sure there are ones that I love and hate more than that, but those are the ones off the top of my head that I can think of. Have you been drawn to horror since childhood or adolescence, or has it been something since adulthood? So we talked about my kind of obsession with horror when I was little and being introduced to it, but something else too that really I think spawned my writing for of horror, like my own personal writing, is a few things. One, we grew up with no money. Sorry, that's my neighbor's garage. We grew up with no money, and so we had to kind of invent ways to entertain ourselves, and one of the ways was my mom would take me to the library every week, and so I would get new books every week to read. I also had to go to work with her a lot. My brother is a lot older than me, and so when I was at my mom's house, I was just kind of alone by myself. So sometimes I went to work with her, and this is kind of weird, but I feel like it's, you know, like my origin story. She worked as an ER room cleaner. Like she cleaned emergency rooms, operating rooms, sorry. And I would go to work with her, and I would sit in this dungeon. I'm not joking. It was a dungeon of this hospital, and it was pitch black. There were no windows. It was downstairs, and I would just write stories for 8 hours a day while she cleaned the emergency or the operating room. And I've always been kind of a person who enjoys their alone time, and I would just entertain myself with writing. So yeah, that's how not exactly a question, but that's how I was drawn to horror, like writing horror myself. How do you resist the temptation to flip to the last page of a book? I've recently started reading Pen Pal, and something caught my eye, which may have spoiled something major. Are you okay? I have never once had the impulse to flip to the last page of the book. Is this something people do? This is appalling to me. I've never even heard this. You can't do that. You can't do that. Here's what you do. Hold on, let me see if I have an example here. Here's what you do. You take one of these and you just keep out the chapter that you're reading at a time, and then you put this on the rest of the book that you're reading. Okay? So I have the first chapter out, and then you read this chapter, and then you can't flip through, because that is crazy. I've never heard anything like that, and that would be horrendous if you flip through and ruined an entire book. I am so sorry that has happened, and Pen Pal's a great one too. Oh, do other people do that? Please let me know. Controversial book opinions. For example, what book do you despise that's generally loved? Book do you despise that's generally loved? I mean, I didn't understand the hype behind Seed, and it seemed like a lot of people like that. I don't like the third Hannibal book. I didn't like the book You, and a lot of people like that, but I think that's just because of my love for American Psycho that I didn't enjoy that one as much. Oh, you want to know one? This is probably going to surprise people. I read The Troop, and I didn't love it as much as other people did. I understood why people liked it, but it just didn't do for me what I thought it was going to do. So that's one. I didn't despise it or anything, but that's one that probably will surprise people. What book do you despise that's generally loved by others? And what book do you love that other people hate? American Psycho. I will ride or die for American Psycho until the end of time, and you can never convince me that that is not the best horror book ever written. People absolutely hate it, and I understand, I get it, but a part of me just cries inside when people like don't finish it because they can't get through it, or they get so irritated with the over explanation of the fancy close that they close the book. It just sucks because it's one of the best books ever written. I will die on that hill. How did your passion for horror literature start? Okay, yeah, there's a few of those. So I think we answered those. Let me give a little bit of a deeper answer, because we talked about childhood, but I think really the big switch in my head where horror in literature became my life was I was going into 7th grade. So it was the summer of 6th grade, and my mom bought me The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon, and I read that book, and it changed my entire life. It's about this girl being lost in the woods, but you don't really know if she's being followed or if she's kind of hallucinating. She hasn't had food or water in a while. And I was transported into those woods with that girl. I had never experienced anything like that before. And that book completely changed the way that I experienced books in general. And I remember I went up to my aunt's house, and everyone was asleep, so I couldn't turn the lights on. But she had lights under her counter. So I was sitting on the kitchen floor, my back against the wall at like 3 o'clock in the morning, just white knuckle finishing this book because I could not put it down. And that is, I think, what began my adult passion for horror literature. I'm really into paranormal or haunting style books right now, and also witchy type books. Can you recommend any? I know The Haunting of Hill House, etc., ones like that. I don't know of any that aren't really popular, but you really like them, especially witchy ones. I truly can't think of like any witchy books that I've read, to be honest. I think for a long time I've kind of stayed away from traditional monsters, and now that I'm going back in and reading those more traditional stories, I realize how much I've enjoyed them. So, but yeah, I unfortunately don't have any witchy book recommendations, but if other people are watching this and do, please leave them down below. But as far as paranormal books, I did a whole ranking of all the haunted house ghost story books that I've read. So I'll leave that in the description for you because I can't even remember what my top books are from that video, but I'll leave that in the description, and there's tons of books in there, so hopefully you can find one in there. What is the horror book that you have read that you cannot stop thinking about or dreaming about? Also, same question, but a horror movie. This is like, it's so funny because people ask me if I get bad nightmares from the extreme horror books that I've read, and it's the more mundane ones. That third Darcy Coates series, the Black Winter series, that book messed me up. I had post-apocalyptic dreams for like a week after reading that book. I could not stop thinking about it. Same with her book From Below. Could not stop thinking about that one. It's definitely like, yeah, the more mild ones that get to me more. And I don't really know why that is. Usually after I read a book that I've enjoyed so much, yeah, I dream about it for probably the next like week or so. But that's the last one that I read that really got into my head. I was telling my husband, we should probably prepare for the impending apocalypse. And he's like, what are you talking about? It really got in my head. Same with The Terror. That's one that definitely got to me. Also a horror movie. Can I tell you a funny story? I watched, demonic movies used to really get to me when I was younger, even up into my 20s. But I watched Paranormal Activity, and I watched it at one of those midnight showings. So it's like 2, 3 in the morning by the time I get home, and I'm just, my mind's racing, right? And I'm thinking about being possessed, and then I'm thinking about other possession movies. I'm thinking about The Exorcist, how they heard stuff in the attic. And then I start remembering that my mom kept hearing stuff in the attic. And then I convinced myself that my mom was possessed. And so I snuck up to her room at like 2, 3 in the morning, and I turned on my flashlight and I crawled to her bedside and I flashed the light on her face just to make myself, you know, feel better that she wasn't possessed. And she woke up and she was so mad at me. She's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm just making sure you're not possessed. This is a true story. And she was so mad. And my poor mother was one of those people who, once you woke her up, she was up for the night, you know? She was very mad at me. But yeah, possession movies used to get to me. I haven't really had a movie get to me in a while. Yeah, I can't really think of the last movie that I watched that got to me. But then I'll read like a cozy mystery and have the most brutal, extreme dreams for a week. So I don't know what's wrong up here. Other than horror and thriller, what are your favorite genres? I also really love science fiction, and I also really love classic literature, although I haven't in recent months been putting enough attention towards that. So I think I'm gonna really make it a point in the new year to read at least 1 or 2 classic literature book a month or something. What are some moments in non-horror books that have scared, horrified, or disturbed you? Oh, I know. Non-horror. Well, I guess this is still kind of horror. But this is The Exorcism of Anneliese Michel, and this is the true... My dog just grunts all the time. This is the true story of Anneliese Michel, and this is the story that the movie The Exorcism of Emily Rose is based on. And so it's just kind of a woman, I think she's like, I can't remember if she's a journalist or what, but she went to Germany and interviewed her whole family. She interviewed the priest, she got all the court documents. Like, she put so much work into this, and it is one of the most terrifying books I've ever read. For the first few years, it wasn't even on my bookshelf. It was in my closet because I couldn't even look at it. It's truly terrifying. So it's not horror, but it's a true story. And again, with the true stuff, it really gets to me. So your favorite musician or band? Man, I don't know. Someone else asked, I think, too. I listen to like the same stuff. I listen to Alice Cooper. I listen to Alice in Chains, so stuff from like my childhood. I listen to stuff from high school, like Pierce the Veil, Bring Me the Horizon. And I listen to rap music, Idea and Abilities, Watsky. I listen to Logic sometimes, that kind of stuff. I listen to just the same stuff over and over again. Your top 3 Bret Easton Ellis books and why? American Psycho and The Shards, because those are the more horror books. And then also Less Than Zero, because not that it's a prequel to American Psycho in any way. It is in the same universe, but I think when you read American Psycho, you think, who could turn out to be like this? Like, these people suck. And then you read Less Than Zero and you're like, oh, these kids grow to be those people. And so in my head, it does kind of, I don't know, enhance the read of American Psycho in some way. And then top 3 Stephen King characters and why. Oh my gosh, I have no idea. This is one that I have to sit and think about. I will say that I do love Louis Creed. Pet Sematary in general just helped me. Well, I read it in different spots in my life. So I first read it in junior high, and then I read it when I was older, and then I read it a few years after my mom passed away. And it's such a beautiful book that really helped me cope with loss, because I think at its core, remove the supernatural stuff, at its core it really is how far you would go to get back someone you loved, and just the pain of grief and the guilt that you feel with it. And I think that Louis Creed is just a good example of just like a decent human in a shitty situation. And I love his and Judd's relationship, and I adore that book. So I would probably say he's one of my favorite. What are your thoughts on the Scarlet Gospel in relation to the Hellbound Heart? I just finished it and it was really disappointing. No, it didn't live up to the original at all. Let me ask you a question. Did you read the other ones in the series? Because that character, I haven't read the Scarlet Gospel, but that detective character is in multiple books. Hold on, let me find which ones. And so I'm curious if that was the reason, or maybe you were just, Mose, what are you doing? Maybe you were just comparing it to the Hellbound Heart, and that's why. I'm curious. So according to this website, read the Hellbound Heart, The Last Illusion, which is a short story, and then that same detective character shows up in The Great and Secret Show, but he's more so in the sequel Everville, which is why I haven't read that one yet, because I wanted to read the others that character was in. But if I'm not mistaken, and I am by no means an expert on Clive Barker's work. I read his books and I enjoy them thoroughly, but I by no means know the order of everything. But I think that the Cenobites have a bit of lore and everything. I did read somewhere that they were even in Weave World and stuff. So yeah, I don't know. I haven't read it, and I wanted to read the other ones before I got to that one, but it is a bummer that it disappointed you. How do you get yourself out of a writing/creative slump? So this is something that I think I'm currently dealing with right now. I think a lot of time I, again, compare myself to other writers and other books, and I just get so defeated and think that, oh, well, I can't make anything like these people, so like why even try? And that is such a lame way to approach any form of art. We should put that in the past, right? Like going forward, the rest of 2023, 2024, let's speak more positively to ourselves. Like, the world is rough enough. So I think this is something that I'm actually working through right now. I also think that I'm constantly thinking of ideas and writing down ideas, so that's not really my issue. But I think my issue is, yeah, more like the self-doubt and self-discipline, 2 things I'm working on. I don't have an answer for you yet, but once I do figure them out, I will come back and let you know. But I am currently struggling with that, like big time. I've always been curious to know what kind of music you listen to. Like, make a basic top 5 of your favorite artists. Okay, yeah, I think I answered that. I think I gave like 5 before. That's kind of all I listen to. I don't know, I just really love what you're doing now. Thank you, I appreciate it. Earliest reading memories, taste, preferences, influential books or authors. Okay, yeah, I think we kind of answered this one too. I would say that the Bailey School Kids were my earliest memories. Oh no, I have one more actually. Okay, this isn't so much a memory, but I have it on videotape and it's kind of funny, so I'll share it with you. I loved books when I was a kid, and so this was before I could read. I was probably like 4, maybe 3, I don't know. And I'm sitting in front of a Christmas tree, and I think it's one of those little critter books or little creature. It could be something else, but I think it's one of those. And I'm reading it verbatim, word for word, because I've been read this story so many times, but the book is upside down and I'm just going through it. I'm sitting in front of a Christmas tree and I'm just going through reading this book, yeah, that is, I think, one of the funnier earlier, and that's not a memory, it's just because I've seen the tape, but yeah, one day I'll find it and show it to you guys because it's kind of funny. Influential books or authors, I would say, yeah, like the Bailey School Kids, Goosebumps obviously, and Stephen King were my earliest introductions to horror that really influenced. And then as far as an adult, oh man, the list goes on and on. Kurt Vonnegut, Chuck Palahniuk, Stephen King, Ronald Malfi's recently become one of my absolute favorites, Dan Simmons, There are just so many amazing writers out there that I just absolutely adore. Do you read cozy mystery books and other genres? Okay, I just read cozy mysteries for the first time last month, no, in September, and I did like a reading fall books, and I found these. It's called Murder in the Mix, and they're by Addison Moore. And so like this one's Bobbing for Bodies, this one's Cutie Pies and Deadly Lies, and they're the cutest things in the world. The only thing is, since I've read a few of them, this was the only one in the cozy mysteries that I actually really enjoyed, and so I don't know where else to go in the cozy mysteries, but this just reminds me of a book that I would have read as a child, but this is for adults, you know, there's like strip clubs and stuff in here, but it is the cutest. I cannot express to you how freaking cute this crap is. And so I'm hooked, and I will forever read these. And I think there's like 50 of them, and I will read all of them. I think they're so cute. She's just a baker in a town, and all the men, I've talked about this book so many times, but all the men are super hunky hot guys, and all the girls are super beautiful, and everything is perfect. And then a murder happens, and she has to try to solve it, and it's just so cute. You could vomit. And yeah, I absolutely have fallen in love with her books. So I just currently bought one more for Christmas to read during Christmas time. But if you have any cozy book recommendations, feel free to leave them down below. Do you find any types of horror books, movies, whatever, boring? So here's what I'll say, especially with movies, I love watching films, and even if I would say that I can appreciate what they are, probably more so than a lot of my other, at least like friends who enjoy horror. I feel like oftentimes they can watch an older film and say that it's boring or it's not effective nowadays, and I think that I can appreciate them maybe a little bit more so than some of my friends do. So I don't know if I'm ever necessarily bored, because I really do enjoy watching older horror films and seeing where the genre began. I also am the type of person where if there's one scene in a movie that I have not seen, because I've seen a million horror movies, that alone is enough for me to be intrigued by the movie and to appreciate it for what it is. And so I don't know that I'm necessarily bored. I mean, I'm sure there are movies that have bored me, obviously. I can't think of any off the top of my head. And as far as books, I would say that probably the only type of book that I would say is boring to me are like haunted house type stories. A lot of the time those bore me. All the famous horror villains go to the same school. Wait, this is the best question ever. Who is the athlete, the whore, the scholar, the fool, and the virgin? This is the best question, and you guys have to answer this down below too, because I'm very curious who you say. And without thinking too much about it, because I'm not going to think about every horror villain ever, I'm just going to think about the most traditional horror villains. But here we go. The whore has to be the Cenobites, right? I mean, they convolute pleasure and pain, and yeah, they gotta be the whore. The scholar has to be Hannibal. The fool has to be it has to be Freddy. Like, he's just the silliest, most absurd one. The virgin, 100% Jason Voorhees, because he is a mama's boy and he would not touch another girl. And the athlete, probably Michael Myers, right? Because he never runs and he always just shows up. This is such a great question. Leave your answers down below. What's the horror movie you watched way too young that traumatized you to this day? This is a great one. Mine is Child's Play. This is such a great question. Okay, let me bring you along a journey to my childhood. Like I said before, my going up to my dad's house, just absolute chaos. No parental guidance at all when I went up there. I was there once and I didn't want to watch horror movies, and my mom said, I'm probably going way too much into detail about this, but anyways, my mom said, if you don't want to watch a horror movie, just say you don't want to watch it. And so I was up at my dad's house once, and he said, everyone's watching the movie Leprechaun. And so I go up and I say, I don't want to watch this movie, I'm scared. And he's like, well, you can either watch the movie or sit alone by yourself in another room, so pick one. And I was like, I guess I'll watch the movie. So I was kind of forced to watch the movie Leprechaun, and I still to this day hate that movie. I don't think I'll ever rewatch it again. That movie has just traumatized the crap out of me from such a young age, and I still hate it. I still hate that movie. That's so funny that yours was Child's Play. I think it's also hilarious that it is Leprechaun. My birthday's on St. Patrick's Day, so by all means that should probably be one of my favorite movies, but that movie absolutely traumatized me as a child, and I will never go back. I'll never watch it. Do you believe in the supernatural, or are you more of a skeptic? I am definitely more of a skeptic. I'm the type of see it to believe it type of girl, you know? Definitely a skeptic, although I do love hearing people's ghost stories and supernatural experiences, but I just don't quite know how I feel about it for myself. But I do believe that other people definitely believe that they see or feel or hear things. Have you ever annotated any of your books? I don't really annotate in the way that most people do. In college, definitely I did when I was reading a text, because we had to analyze it so deeply, you know? So we were doing all the whole, like, every character, every scene, you know? But I enjoy texts less when I have to do like that level of annotating, unless I'm sitting down and really, really analyzing the work. It just takes so much time. I just really just pin quotes that I like. That's all I do. And most of the time I highlight, and I don't even use like sticky tabs or anything. What are the most disturbing books and movies you have ever seen? I think I kind of answered this one. I'm sure there are more most disturbing books. And then, yeah, again, the book, I would just say like The Terror. I can't really think of other one. Oh, and that Annalise Michelle one, that one really got to me. What is your favorite Stephen King novel? Pet Sematary. Would you ever play scary games on this channel? Okay, I don't know if you mean board games or video games. Video games, probably not, unless you guys want to laugh at how bad I am at video games. Board games, I do love. And in fact, for Halloween, for October, I wanted to do a specific board game, but I kind of test the waters with videos. I don't know how they're gonna do. And so I played the Guess Who horror game first, and that video didn't go over well. So I'm like, okay, people don't want to watch those type of videos. It's kind of hard. Like sometimes I just put videos up that I want to put up, and sometimes I kind of test the waters and see what does well, what you guys want to watch. And so with something like playing video games, I would have to do multiple or not video games, but board games. I'd have to do multiple camera angles, and it takes a lot of editing. I mean, just that Guess Who game took forever to edit. So with videos like that, it's harder to decipher if anybody will even watch it and if it's worth the editing that would take place for it. So yeah, I'll kind of leave that up to you guys if you guys would be interested in like board games, because I love them. I would definitely play board games. Video games, not so much. What do you think of cosmic horror? Like H.P. Lovecraft kind of stuff? I love Lovecraft. Let me get a definition. Okay, Lovecraftian horror, sometimes used interchangeably with cosmic horror, is a genre of horror and science fiction that emphasizes the horror of the unknowable and incomprehensible more than the gore of the elements and shock. I mean, I love H.P. Lovecraft. I can't think of too many other books that would fit into this category that I've read, but I do love H.P. Lovecraft's work, and I am a big fan of science fiction, which I feel like might overlap here. What's your favorite horror movie / book trope? Oh, this is a good one. I am a girl who loves her tropes. I love it all. I truly love it all. And I know a lot of people are like, oh, we're sick of watching the same thing. You're not, though. Horror is built off of the backs of these tropes, and yeah, we all love them. So I don't know that there's necessarily one that's my favorite, but I do love me a trope, I'm not gonna lie. Little free library tour or local bookstore visits? Local bookstore visits. I feel a little weird taking books from the free libraries. I think because I have so many books for myself. So I would rather go to the used bookstore. What is your favorite Chuck Palahniuk book and why? I really do like Fight Club. I did a whole book analyzing that book and talking about how it actually is so freaking ingenious. So I'll leave that one linked down below. Invisible Monster was my favorite growing up, but it's been so long since I've read that I can't really give you a reason why, you know, but I do think that it was just really shocking, the character in herself. Like for me, reading a character that's as like an, you know, uncomfortable teen or whatever, you know, yeah, I was a teen definitely when I read that book. To read a book about somebody who's beautiful and doesn't want that, I don't know, it just was such an interesting character for a young teen girl to read. But I would definitely have to reread that one to say for sure that it's my favorite. Any long-term reading plans or projects for 2024? Yes, if I do not get this book done in 2024, you guys have the right to lay Legos all over my house. As far as other projects, like for this channel, I am slowly, very slowly, learning a new editing software. So I hope that I can provide videos that are maybe more in detail and in depth and more deeper dives into things that are better edited. So those are my plans for 2024. Favorite novel that isn't a horror book. I think I've kind of answered this. Kurt Vonnegut's Mother Night and Slaughterhouse-Five. The Devil All the Time by Donald Ray Pollock. That's one of my favorites. Dark Matter, that's not a horror book. That's one of my favorites. Fear and Loathing. Oh, The Stranger by Albert Camus. That's one of my favorites. George Orwell's 1984. Oh, Kafka, anything by Kafka. Fight Club, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep. I think those are some good examples. Those are my favorite, probably, not horror books. What are your thoughts on Colleen Hoover? Okay, let's have a little rant session right here. Let me start out by saying that I am not knowledgeable on the subject of Colleen Hoover. I'm not by any means like her biggest cheerleader or anything like that. So I could be wrong with this stuff. So let me know if there's more to the story than I know. However, I read these books. It ends with us and it starts with us, okay? This was the most sold book of 1 year, and so I did a video on it. So I picked it up, I read it. I didn't think I was gonna like it. It's not in my category. I think the back implies that it's kind of a romance story, and so I didn't think I was gonna like it. I read it. I loved this book. I thought that it was such an important book for young women. It's about, or men even, it's about a relationship that turns toxic. And I think sometimes when you're young, you don't realize how toxic or dangerous a relationship or situation can be. And I think that reading a book like this when you're younger can make you maybe point out things in your relationship that aren't quite right. So I do think it's an important book to read. So for that, I praise this book. I think it's awesome. For the next one that came out, because these are the only two that I've read, so these are the only ones that I can talk about, but this one's the most popular. For this one was really heavy in nature. This one, I just wanted it to be a light love story, and that's what it was, and it was fine. I didn't find anything wrong with it. I think people don't like her for a few reasons. I've seen criticism about this book specifically that she's glorifying abuse, and I think that is so freaking wrong. Well, let me separate these things. On one hand, I think that it's wrong because she's speaking about her own abusive relationship that she grew up in with her mother and father, and she's writing from her own experience, and you can never tell somebody that they're wrong to write about their own experience. I think that's so messed up. The glorifying abuse thing, I don't understand with that. However, I think other people don't like that the back implies that it's a love story and then you read it and it is about an abusive relationship. So if that's what they mean by it, then I can kind of understand what they're coming from, and I do think that the book back is deceptive. However, do I think that every book needs to tell you, hey, these are things that you might find offensive or be sensitive to? Not necessarily, but I do think the back could have been more descriptive in the sense that it's not just a love story. Okay, so that's how I feel about the very limited knowledge I have about Colleen Hoover. Otherwise, I don't know any other critique. That's just the very, very limited amount of critique that I've heard about her. So I don't know if I'm missing any sort of picture. I've never read any of her other books, but that's what I have to say about those. I think unfortunately when you get to a point of being that big, people just kind of hate you to hate you, and I think there's a lot in that book that it ends with us. I think there's a lot of good in that book, regardless of what people want to say. Okay, that's what I would have to say. But if there's more to the story, obviously let me know. I just talked for so long that my camera died, my phone restarted the thing, so if I miss any comments, I apologize. And also I was so freaking hungry that I had to stop and get a snack, but we're back and we're almost done. Did you ever see the Terror TV show, and if so, what do you think? I did start it with my husband. We've only seen the first episode. I don't like TV shows. I never remember to go back and finish them. I have a really hard time watching them, so I haven't watched it all yet. I did really enjoy the first episode though, so hopefully eventually one decade I'll get around to watching all of it. Have you ever read a Bentley Little book? If not, you should read The Haunted by him. I think that's the one that I read by him. And I enjoyed the backstory of the land a lot. That was definitely my favorite part of the book. But I'm not the biggest haunted book trope kind of lover, you know? But I did read one book from him, and I think I either have another one or there is another one that I want to read. I'm not sure. Do you have a favorite memoir? Any recs? I don't necessarily have memoirs, but I do have nonfiction suggestions like this one that I showed earlier. This is the one that I would recommend definitely. And then there's also, hold on, actually let me grab a few nonfiction books for you. These are my favorite. This is by G.L. Davies, and this is Harvest, this is the true story of alien abduction, and Haunted Horror of Haverford West. These are both supposedly true stories about aliens and ghosts, and these are amazing. And then I also like this autobiography, this Johnny Cash one, just because I'm a huge Johnny Cash fan. So if you're a big fan of him, I highly suggest that one too. Other than books and movies, obviously, any other consuming passions or interests we need to know about, excluding your husband, of course? Not really. I don't really do much else. I like going on walks. I'm 87, I don't know. I like going on walks. I like hiking. And my husband and I play disc golf every once in a while. But yeah, I don't really do much else. Write, read, make YouTube videos, walk my dogs. That's kind of my life. Favorite non-horror Stephen King book? Mine is Blaze. I couldn't think of the answer to this question until I was editing, but definitely on writing. It's the memoir of his craft of writing, and it's great for writers, but there's a lot of anecdotes about his childhood and life as well. So I think it's just kind of fun to read for everyone. I did really enjoy Rage. So maybe Rage, I guess, only because I really don't know that I've read a bunch of his non-horror work. Thoughts on Chucky? I'm not sure what Chucky you mean. I don't know if a new one came out. I don't know if you're talking about the TV show or the remake or the original. I love the original movie. Well, I guess that's Child's Play. So there must be a new one that came out. I don't know what they're doing now. If it's a TV show, I've never seen it. I don't watch TV. Can you do the spooky, scary skeleton dance? You do not want to see me dance at all. I can promise you that. How do I get my books in your hands? Okay, this is a good question. Here's the thing. From the beginning of this channel, I have thought it very important to highlight authors that are maybe self-published or just smaller authors, whatever that means, independently published or what have you. So I have done little videos here and there where I would read books that were sent to me. And a lot of the people I became, you know, like friendly with online, I still talk to and follow and that kind of stuff. And that was fine when my channel was so small. Right now I have 9 books to get through that have been sent to me, and I will get through them, but I think I'm gonna wait until the beginning of the year because I have just way too much to do before then. So I will get through them eventually, but I'm just having a really hard time figuring out how to go about doing this because I am just overwhelmed with the amount of people that want to send me a book. Like, I'm fine you sending me a book and I put it in a book haul and read the back and we discuss it, but I also feel like that's kind of a waste of your money if it just sits on a shelf and doesn't get read, you know what I mean? So I'm having a hard time kind of figuring out what to do. I did just reopen a P.O. box, but I don't know if I just want to put it out and see what happens, or I don't know. But if you have any suggestions on how I can go about that in a reasonable way, but then other people still have a reasonable expectation of me, I'm definitely willing to listen. Favorite band / group? Tell me it's Suicide Boys, please. I'm so lame, I don't even know who that is. Any book tropes you can't stand? Like I said, I really do enjoy tropes. I think the only trope, I don't know if it would be considered a trope, but the only thing that I don't like particularly in movies and books is when the creator thinks that the audience is dumb. That's the only thing I don't like, when you can't think for yourself, when you can't put the pieces together for yourself. I would much rather fill out the puzzle and not have every piece filled in but still enjoy the story than see the full story but have every piece laid out for me. So, but I do think that that has like almost become a trope in itself, especially in horror movies where it's just so exaggerated. In that new Halloween Ends, I just watched that. It's another example. He's cutting something and it zooms in on the knife, and then they look away and they zoom in and the knife's gone. It's like, you could have just removed the knife and we still would have got, you know what I mean? It's just kind of frustrating for me. So that's the only trope I would say that I don't like. And I'm not huge on haunted stuff either, just because it doesn't really scare me, but not that it can't be done well. Do you like Ice Nine Kills? I am so lame, I don't even know who that is. I'm assuming it's music, maybe? But I really don't know. Cats or dogs, compare and contrast. You can't have both dogs. This is actually an easy question. I love my cat, do not get me wrong. I worship the ground that her furry little paws walk on. But I had a cat before her growing up. Her name was Tatum, and she was the most precious angel in the world. She never did anything wrong. She never chewed on stuff, never. And so when I saw other cats behaving weird, I would be like, oh, your cat's weird. But I didn't realize that Tatum was the weird one. So then when Tatum passed away, a while later, we got Morella. And Morella is, love her to death, the bane of my existence. That cat is, I'm not joking, the epitome of evil. I have not slept in 4 years. I have had to pull hair ties out of her throat, full hair ties, on multiple occasions. I had to pull a piece of glass out of her mouth because she was chewing on glass. She screams at me at least 10 times a day, and I have to follow her to her food bowl and pet her. Like, she just wants me to not have a job, never work, never go outside, and just pet her every time she's hungry. She beats the living crap out of my big dog. My big dog is terrified of her. What else does she do? She chews on every book I've ever owned, has little kitty teeth marks in it. She gets into everything, everything. People warned me that getting dogs was hard. I promise you, I would rather have 100 of my dogs than that one cat. She is a living nightmare. We can't cut her claws. My brother, who's a vet tech for like, I'm not joking, like 15, 20 years, could not cut my cat's claws. He's like, something is wrong with this cat. So yes, dogs all the way. She has officially ruined cats for me. I don't think I'll ever have a cat again. I love them. I adore them. Little kittens are the cutest things ever. But yeah, Morella has ruined cats for me. Still love her. Still wouldn't do anything differently. But I think moving forward, I'm a dog girl. Okay, last question, guys. I personally can't stand Stephen King's writing. It's just not for me, but I love the stories and concepts. Do you have any horror recs that have the same vibe as Stephen King? I think the only other writer that I've read that really feels like Stephen King is maybe Peter Straub. But it also depends what type of stories that you're reading from Stephen King. A lot of them are more supernatural based, but he does have ones that are more based in realities. It kind of depends on that as well. In my head, he's just like on another level, and there's really not much comparison to him. So if anybody else has recommendations that are similar to Stephen King but aren't Stephen King, feel free to leave them down below. But I would say maybe check out Peter Straub, because from the very limited knowledge I have of Peter Straub, he seems to be like in that same realm. Whew, that was it. Did I miss anything? Because my thing restarted, so. Oh, did I answer this one? Do you have a favorite contemporary horror author? I think most of my horror authors are probably considered contemporary, the favorite ones that I listed, so I think I answered that. Guys, I think that's it. Thank you so much if you made it this far. I'm very impressed because I'm even tapped out. Let me know your comments and your thoughts about all this kind of stuff down below. Thank you so much for watching this video. I appreciate you, and I will see you soon with another horror video. Bye, guys.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear that the thoughts build up until I can't hear, that my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper.